fit, then do it.
My mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 1994, about 14 years ago. My mother had tremors in her right hand to start with, and we noticed those about a year ahead of time. And then as things progressed, she's a nurse, and she knew almost immediately what it was, and she went to a neurologist and then was diagnosed. There's a concern for the safety of the home. One of the things that we did was we brought in an occupational therapist who watched my mother walk through the home, do her daily activities, actually get into the bathtub, and she made recommendations for things like grab bars, aids for turning over in bed, something to keep the blankets off her feet because that where it's too heavy on her for her to be able to move at night. Higher toilets, where the grab bar should go for the toilets, the shower chair, all kinds of wonderful creative ideas. And we implemented all of them pretty quickly. And then it became very clear that there were other aspects to the safety, which is decluttering. You can't have any clutter. You need the floors need to be, clean and no shoes floating around with little kids running around. I have to be careful that the kids know their shoes go under the table, not in the middle of the room. And you try to keep anything sharp that she could fall against covered, those kinds of things. And even then you can't prevent falls, but you can make them a lot less painful.
There are exciting new advancements in treatments in Parkinson's disease research that are helping patients to better manage their symptoms.
When considering the latest research on the origins of Parkinson's disease, we haven't reached any conclusive knowledge of what the trigger is that causes Parkinson's. The latest research looks at the mitochondria where energy is generated in the cell, and that some process dysregulates the energy generation in the cell and causes proteins to be burned up at a higher rate. This is known as oxidative stress. So many of the new research initiatives that are going on look at oxidative stress. We'll be actually starting a research product on coenzyme Q10 in the next month here, looking at that. It's funded by the National Institute of Health. The genetics of Parkinson's right now is that there seems to be a small genetic link. I have two sets of patients, each of which are twins, both have Parkinson's disease. They're identical twins. What we do know is that at the age of 65, there's about a 1 in 100 chance of having Parkinson's disease. If you have a first-degree relative with Parkinson's, the risk is 2%. So you can either look at it as a 98% chance that you won't have Parkinson's disease if you have a relative, or that your risk is doubled. There is a lot of research looking at early detection. If you look at risk groups like people that have a first-degree relative with Parkinson's disease, they then give them smell identification tests because loss of sense of smell is one of the early warning signs of Parkinson's disease. The normal average age of onset of Parkinson's is about 61 years of age. But in the last month, I've diagnosed somebody who was 36 with Parkinson's disease and somebody who was 92. It appears most frequently in the 50s and 60s, though. There's a great deal of difference among Parkinson patients in general. No one person with Parkinson's is like any other person with Parkinson's. The rate they progress at and the rate at which they develop tremor or specific symptoms varies across the board. Younger patients are going to live longer with Parkinson's disease, and they tend to be more tremor predominant, and older patients tend to be have more difficulties with slowness and balance issues and falls. In general, early treatment starts with something like an MAO-B inhibitor. Also, early on in Parkinson's disease, dopamine agonists are used. You try to use the strongest medicine, Sinemet or carbidopa-levodopa. You try to save that for last, to keep your strong card to play last. And when someone starts to fail medical treatment, there are other modalities such as deep brain stimulation surgery. I'm currently adjusting about 60 people with DBS systems in their brain. This is where wires are implanted down into the basal ganglia of the brain, and there's a stimulator in your chest, sort of like a cardiac stimulator. And I adjust that and program away the symptoms as best I can. I think until we know what the cause of Parkinson's is, prevention is an illusion that sort of recedes as you try to reach out for it. One of the interesting things with Parkinson's is people feel fatigued all the time. Yet, if they go out and do things, they feel so much better after they've done a good workout, taken a walk, gone for a bicycle ride. I can continually preach this one doctrine to my patients: if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I send them to physical therapy. I tell them to join Tai Chi clubs. I have them participate in so much physical activity.
Clinical trials are government-regulated research studies, and they're very strict protocols, usually looking at investigational new drugs before they're on the market, sometimes looking at approved medicines, but a different use. We have 2 clinical trials running now. One is in the final stages, and it's looking at an approved medication that's being looked at as perhaps having a slowing down effect. The one that is enrolling subjects at the moment is for people who have psychosis, and this is hallucinations, delusions, psychiatric side effects of medicines. Dopamine tends to do this at high doses or for long periods of time. So we're looking at an investigational drug that, added to the dopamine-containing medicines for Parkinson's, will get rid of those psychotic symptoms and allow the Parkinson's medicines to be utilized better. With new medicines, sometimes there's a chance that it'll work better than anything else. In clinical trials, though, there's usually a placebo group. So for either all of the study or the first half of the study, people won't know what they're getting. And then in many trials, in the second half, everybody gets the real thing. So it's kind of, you take a chance on the first half, but the way to look at it for many people is, if I get the placebo, I'll be no different than I am now, which, you're not worse. If there are side effects, you simply drop out. You don't have to stick it out. And if you happen to get the active drug, then you may be better. So that's one advantage, is you get a chance to get something before anybody else does that might help. And ultimately, you are helping the science and the Parkinson's community in general. Of course, you want to ask, what the hope is, what the aim of the study is, what are they trying to prove? And then there are a lot of questions that people need to ask. How many visits will it entail? What kind of risks are there? Every clinical trial has an informed consent. It's a very long document, but it leaves no question unanswered. Every single evaluation, what's done at every visit, how often the visits are, what are all the possible side effects, all the possible benefits, whether you'll get paid or not, how much travel is involved. So, and this is something that hasn't always been, but in recent years, clinical trials are very well regulated. People should come to their doctor with some questions. I always suggest them to be written down. If things occur to you from visit to visit, jot them down, bring that piece of paper. Because, if there were 20 things on that piece of paper, your doctor might roll his eyes. But at least you can get a couple of really specific questions answered. Because if you wait until you get there and he says, what are your problems? Let me think. So number one, bring some questions. Number two, have a list of all the medicines you take, because you're seeing one doctor. We all know that you see so many different doctors, and not all the medicines are good together, and your neurologist may only be specifically asking about neurology medicines, whereas the ones you take from your cardiologist or the ones you take from your dermatologist may also interact. So I'd bring a list of medicines, I'd have questions, and ask what's new, and if there's anything that you can try or help with.